Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I want to go ahead and preface this video. I didn't really ever intend for a lot of sort of, for lack of a better term, op-ed or opinion pieces regarding policy on sort of lockdowns and masks and things and COVID generally to really seep into discussions that are sort of things that I post onto this channel. That really was never my intention, especially when this started. Now, as 15 months has dragged on, and I've definitely seen the situation go from good to better to kind of worse to way worse to, just not particularly good. And I mean this more from an economic standpoint rather than looking at tracking the virus or anything like this. We've obviously, I've made videos on here regarding just sort of more generalized topics. It's not my intention. This is probably going to be the last video I do on these more sort of general discussions of the overall situation, because frankly, the purpose of this channel is to discuss legal issues. Now, it's sort of seeped into the discussion because it's this COVID policy has such a broad impact on, well, the law and the rules and just everything right now, immigration law as well as laws regarding even being able to open one's business. So, I haven't felt too bad about it happening, but I do like to keep things a little bit more compartmentalized than this. So I'm curious to know, I'm kind of thinking about firing up another channel where I discuss more of these kind of opinion pieces on a more regular basis, or let me just say, maybe that channel would be exclusively dedicated to that, and we'll just leave that over there. I'd be curious to hear in the comments or to hear any feedback from folks if they would be interested in that, because I think moving forward after this video, because this kind of sums up, this video is probably going to kind of sum up where I stand or what I think on this and what I think we'll probably have moving forward. I do think over the course of the rest of this summer, we're going to have a lot of developments that are going to be more strictly legal. So I don't even really think it's particularly necessary for me to, discuss things more generally in kind of a more opinion-based sense. But I'm curious for folks' feedback. If folks would be interested in that, I can do that. Although, me personally, I wouldn't want to hear me pontificate endlessly on what my opinions are, but it wouldn't just be an opinion channel, but maybe we do things that were on another channel that were less of a legalistic bent. And that is the purpose of this channel. It's to discuss legal issues, not really to discuss opinion, albeit I've had no problem with that because COVID policy has, it's just been so all-encompassing. So leaving that aside, we'll get sort of the nuts and bolts of this video, but I am curious for folks' feedback, and if people really don't want to hear me pontificate any further, I'm happy to hear that too, and I can discontinue that. The reason for this video is I got some interesting feedback, to say the least, after one of the last sort of opinion pieces we did regarding, this alcohol ban and just the kind of, I don't know, I don't know what the right word is, but the sort of imperious proclamations regarding why an alcohol ban cannot be rescinded right now. And, from watching that video, I'm sure most people could tell, I'm a little bit passionate about that issue. The purpose of this video is, I'm not trying to be critical of the government or what they're doing. I can't necessarily say I would do much better. That's not my purpose in making these videos. My purpose is maybe, sometimes when there's a gadfly out there, it allows people to maybe see things from a different angle and perhaps kind of shape their position and maybe cause them to see things in such a way that they can make better decisions, perhaps. In a recent article from the South China Morning Post, that's scmp.com, there was this article titled, "Singapore Preparing to Live with Endemic COVID-19 as Residents Grow, quote, battle weary, unquote, of pandemic, ministers say." Now, let me be clear. I don't like comparing one country's policy to another country's policy on much of anything. So I'm rather loath to do that just in a general sense. What's good for Singapore may not necessarily be good for Thailand. That said, this brought up something rather interesting, this notion of starting to treat this as endemic rather than discussing this whole thing in this kind of pandemic containment kind of verbiage. And just one thing to note just off the top here, where they say battle weary, I'm also kind of tired of all of this discussion of COVID being couched in this sort of wartime phraseology as if we're getting out there and battling some foe. I mean, it's a disease. It is what it is. It's pandemic, and this warrior prose is just kind of strange to me. But okay, that's just one man's opinion. But back to this notion again, the difference between treating something as endemic versus this kind of pandemic thinking, and it's sort of my overarching thesis in my mind about COVID generally, which is the horse has already bolted the barn and we're closing the door. The cat is out of the bag. When this hit community spread, to my mind, all of these methodologies that are out there, lockdowns, masking and things, it all seems to be based on, it seems to be predicated on the notion that this can be contained, and that by containing it, it can effectively, be eradicated because it can be contained, and then it won't get out any further, and then it's gone. And there was a point in time, I would argue that point in time was geographically located in China, but there was a point in time where, yes, protocols presumably could have been put in place to contain this into a certain geographic area and then deal with it there and sort of put it to rest, if you will. Well, that time has come and gone. And I think one of the big things where a lot of people, lay people and even policymakers, have had kind of it's been sort of almost a strange, kind of paradoxical thinking where folks are basically operating as if this, again, can be sort of contained and eradicated. And as we'll get to reading, in some of the excerpts here, these folks down in Singapore don't seem to think that, and I don't think it's too far off to say that probably isn't really the case under the circumstances presently. Now, we'll put this article real quick on screen so folks can see it. And now I'm going to go ahead and quote directly. The three ministers who co-head the government's coronavirus task force said in an op-ed they were sketching out a plan to treat COVID-19 as endemic. Quoting further, Singapore is drawing up a blueprint for COVID-19 becoming endemic, a shift away from monitoring daily cases and a return of mass gatherings like the country's annual National Day Parade, officials said on Thursday. Their comments follow recent intimations by other governments, including neighboring Malaysia, that a different approach to deal with the pandemic may be required as it becomes increasingly apparent that there is no credible route to eliminating COVID-19 from the world. And yeah, I know there's a lot of people that don't like to hear that. But the fact is, this notion that we're in this war of attrition and we're going to kill every COVID virus out there, I just don't see that, and as kind of noted in this article, I don't really see that that's feasible at this point, at this stage of the game. As I said earlier, to use that metaphor, the horse is bolted from the barn. The time to get that done has, I think, come and gone. I think it's starting to become increasingly clear that that's the case. And for that reason, maybe policy thinking should evolve to kind of come more into line with that fact. Quoting further, Singapore is in the midst of scaling back restrictions on public gatherings put in place in May following a surge in cases. Quoting further, all are asking when and how will the pandemic end? Ministers Gan Kim Yong, Ong Yi Kung, and Lawrence Wong wrote in their opinion piece. The bad news is that COVID-19 may never go away. The good news is that it is possible to live normally with it in our midst. This means COVID-19 will very likely become endemic. Like influenza, COVID-19 will continue to mutate and survive in the community, though a majority of those who contract it will recover without needing to be hospitalized and with little or no medication, the ministers said. We will work towards a similar outcome for COVID-19. We can't eradicate it, but we can turn the pandemic into something much less threatening, like influenza, hand, foot, and mouth disease, or chickenpox, and get on with our lives, they said. Quoting further, authorities may also do away with massive contact tracing and quarantining each time an infection is detected. On monitoring cases, the ministers said the focus would shift to outcomes, quote, how many fall sick, how many are in the intensive care unit, how many need to be intubated for oxygen, and so on. So, I mean, long story short, and again, I urge those who are watching this video, go read that article. There's a lot in there. I'm just sort of taking some of the more salient points as excerpts for this video. The reason I bring it up is, again, Thailand is not Singapore. I'm not claiming that, nor would I want it to be. I love Thailand the way it is. I love Thailand the way it was in Q1 of 2020. It's been kind of a different place throughout the roughly 15 months we've been dealing with this. I do think everybody's been operating, in good faith, trying to do their best efforts to get everybody through this. But the reason I'm bringing this up is, it really is it's a good point to maybe stop thinking in terms of pandemic and start thinking in terms of endemic, that we're just going to have to live with this. Because a lot of these measures, and they are very over-the-top measures compared to, lack of a better term, and I hate using normal, especially under current circumstances, but compared to sort of normal times, if we went back to the end of 2019 and somebody told anyone that these current measures that we're dealing with, lockdowns and things of this nature, would be in place, especially to the extent that they are, I think everybody would say that person was crazy, that's just not possible to see that happen. But here we are. But it's predicated on this notion that it's temporary in order to just get rid of the virus. Well, as noted by these ministers in their editorial and in this article in the South China Morning Post, that's probably not the best position to have presently. Sort of where we're at 15 months on, it doesn't look necessarily possible to go ahead and eradicate that. Now, by changing that paradigm, that definitely goes ahead and changes the way that we think in terms of how to handle this. And I think it can provide some insight to folks out there. I think it can, hopefully, we can see a situation where, look, obviously the vaccines are rolling out. We've yet to see that fully come online, and it's coming. I don't think that there's any other way to put it than that. That's an inevitability. Vaccinations are going to ramp up, and that's going to have its own set of consequences, hopefully for the best. But as that happens, hopefully we can kind of look at this more as something to deal with, that we have to move forward and get on with our lives in a more normal way, rather than viewing it as something temporary that we have to take really extreme measures to deal with so that we can put it behind us. I think that's probably a good time for us to really start rethinking those kind of methodologies.